Hello and welcome to The Exchange, where we invite leaders in their field to join us to discuss topics of interest to all of us in our everyday lives. I'm Rob Buckingham and my co-host on The Exchange is my wife, Christie.
I am really looking forward to today's show. It's going to be absolutely awesome.
Absolutely.
We'll be looking at an interesting topic of managing money in relationships. Does what belong to me automatically become ours?
Apparently.
And is there a line between the two?
To discuss this topic, we're delighted to be joined by Larke Riemer, Director of Women's Markets for Westpac Bank. Larke has over 3 decades of experience in banking. Welcome, Larke.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Thanks very much.
Great. We're also joined by Tita Cook, who's a Relationship Education Officer and Couples Counsellor with LifeWorks. She works regularly and practically with pre-marriage counselling as well as transitions in a couple's life. Welcome, Tita.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks for coming. Before we start our discussion, let's take a look at this.
When it comes to managing finances in a relationship, you need to talk about it with your partner. Doing nothing is the worst thing you can do, as you're not making your money work for you or planning for your future. Every relationship has a different dynamic and varying income levels, but you still need to act responsibly. Don't be blinded by love. Make sure you know where your money is going in your relationship.
That's a really interesting topic today, and Larke, maybe we'll start with you. Is there a place in a relationship to say that this is my money rather than this is our money?
Absolutely, there is.
I like that.
Yeah.
I
That's the answer you
absolutely
wanted
agree
to
with
hear,
that. I
right?
wanted that answer. You might have a different one, though.
Okay, tell us why, Larke.
Well, in any partnership, relationship or business, I mean, at the end of the day, there is the common grounds of which you do things together, which is the family. But as individuals, you also need to have your own money that you're responsible for. And I think that makes for a strong relationship, and you need to trust one another. So, but very much so, I think for the combined finances that you do together, both people need to have a say and both people need to be very aware of what's going on.
So should you have your own private account as well?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Our grandmothers and mothers used to call it their running away money from the girl's point of view.
Yes.
You know,
My
make
dad
sure
calls
you've got
it
your
the surplus.
escape money.
Yeah, he calls it the surplus. He said, I can't believe you don't have any surplus.
Yes. So I think there's been different names for it over the generations, but at the end of the day, I think when you come into a relationship, a marriage or whatever it should be, you should have some independence so that you feel that you've got something that's yours and both know each other has their own
so
independence.
it's not some little private
so not
stash.
something to hide, no.
Okay.
It's
You're listening to this
yes,
now.
yes.
It's not a private stash. Tita, would you agree with that?
I think coming from the relationship point of view, what I would like to say is that there's not a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah.
It is really based on the couple and the communication that they have about this topic. It's very important. I fully agree with what we just watched, that talking about money is a very important part in the relationship, because we know that money can become a real issue in relationships. And from what we know from social research, social science research done, there's Dr. Scott Stanley from Denver University, who has done a lot of study on these, and he has come up with a little phrase that is called sliding versus deciding. And we use that. It helps us understand very much how the dynamics go in relationships, because the trend in the last couple of decades has been that couples tend to slide into even pairing up and start living together. And because there's not a clear way of discussing and talking about even choosing to live together, they just suddenly find that out of convenience they start living together.
Kind of slip into it.
Exactly. They suddenly realize that if they haven't made that decision, what this research shows that all aspects of the relationship tend to start sliding.
So you say the same with money. They actually just slide into sharing bills.
It could be because it's not spoken directly. Many times it's just they drifted into a relationship, so they're drifting into things happen.
So it needs to be deliberate, needs to be talked about,
Exactly,
discussed. Yep.
exactly. I actually today had a phone call from a client at the bank who asked me to get involved to help her with her daughter-in-law's parents, because the husband had died unexpectedly, and the woman had no idea of the money situation, and there was a considerable amount of money all tied up in his name. And as you know, with probate, and once someone passes away, she has no money.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
And wasn't aware of any of this. So falling in love and getting in a relationship is all wonderful, and money can sometimes be that hard discussion that you don't want to have, but we don't want to spoil romance and take any of that away. It can actually be covered in a really sensible way, and if it's difficult, then you have a third party who can be in the conversation with you.
So that's exactly where I come in that my father has been in that situation where family money has been tied up during that legal process for 6 months and sometimes even for longer. And he has never wanted to see me in that situation. It's not that he has wanted me to have this separate account, you know, for running away money,
No.
but he wanted me to have access to something if something was to happen to my husband. And I immediately had access to funds before you know, anything else would happen.
I think it's just giving you security. And men and women, you just need to have that security that, yes, you've got the joint account and the joint expenses that you do, but sometimes actually when you come into a relationship, you've got established debt. There's things that you're doing anyway before you came into that relationship. You need to have discussions around that because, you know, as a partner, you don't want to go into that relationship and not know that, my goodness, maybe now I've got a considerable amount of debt that I was not aware of on both sides as well. So.
Well, we know a lady that happened to. She was actually left comfortably off and then got into a relationship, got married, and her husband had lots and lots of bad debt that then took all of her money away.
Yes.
And then, of course, the
And you
relationship
hear
fell on a
stories-
heap. And
You hear stories like that, Rob, all the time in my business, all the time.
Can I
Heartbreaking.
just comment on this and what Larke just sort of said? I think it's very important, and this is one thing that we like to make couples aware of, is when you enter a new relationship, it's researched that both men and women go into what I would call, the best way to explain this, like a hormonal high. Yeah, so it's the time we can call it in love. It's got a scientific name, the limerence time, and it's almost the time of where we are blinded to see really the reality of the other person. We're so in love. That's when it's Prince Charming and Cinderella. Yeah, it's exactly, I think, what you're talking about. That at that time we don't want to talk about realities and finances, etc. And so that could be an issue. That where there is a young couple or a couple repartnering after a separation, divorce, etc., that needs to be kept in mind. And for us, what we try and make the couple aware is that all aspects are part of your relationship. And it's not because you are in the lovey-dovey stage of the relationship.
So love is blind, but marriage is an eye-opener.
Exactly. And finances is a very important part of the
part.
relationship. Exactly what Larke said, you don't want to start and suddenly find out, I didn't know there were debts that my partner brings to the relationship, and now what am I going to do?
Financial issues, I think, from memory, are one of the leading causes of relationship breakdown.
Well, there's Dr. John and Julie Gottman. They're the gurus around the world on couples relationships, and through the research, which is very solidly founded, they have identified 6 areas that they consider to be the hotspots for relationships, that all relationships at some point in time might struggle with. And in the work that I do, it's interesting that many times when I ask couples to help me identify why they think they always name finances. And it is one of those.
You would say the same, Larke?
Can I also say, not only with the couples, but if you look, we did a lot of research with families, and it's behaviours in the family around money that shows children a bad episode around mum and dad are always fighting, but it's always about money. And so those children grow up with this insecurity of, gee, it must be money that is the problem. So therefore, it's also the way in which the arguments are happening in the family that we discovered that once people sat down and even brought the children together to say, well, this is what we're planning on. We can't go on holidays to Disney World, or we can't do this because money is an issue and we're going to save for that, instead of having these arguments, and the small children are listening to this all the time. So money is a really big driver around happiness or unhappiness, whichever way you manage your affairs within your family unit.
The way we like to explain this to couples and make them aware of how money can have an impact in the relationship is that it's not about the amount of money that there is. I mean, because money issues can happen with couples where money is the amount is very small, or where there's enormous income and earning capacity. What is important is what are the habits and the attitudes that you bring about money to the relationship. Yes. Which one of the elements, like Larke is saying, is the family of origin, your caregivers, your parents, whatever you experienced. It could be that it provokes memories and feelings of worry, anxiety, fear. If money was very tight and if you couldn't go on nice holidays or you couldn't have special after school activities like your friends could. But it could also be the opposite. You might have lived in an environment where there was plenty of money, so money for you represents...
So it's not the amount, it's the attitude.
It's the attitude, yeah.
We'll unpack a little bit more about that. And we need to take a break. We'll be back with more discussion soon on The Exchange. Welcome back to The Exchange. We're having an interesting discussion with Larke Riemer and Tita Cook about managing money within a relationship.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Tell us, Larke, how has money management changed over the decades within families?
Well, when you think about our great-grandparents in Australia, it would have been after the war years, and they came back and they were really big savers. So they came back, worked hard and saved and to buy a home or to do something. So always a very big savings ethic around our families. Whereas when you go to the next generation, and then my parents, for instance, and then myself as a baby boomer, it has all changed. And then if you go to today, to the Y generation, we've done recent research which shows that 30% of Y generation women already own their own homes in this country, which is a real change. Yes. But from my point of view, I don't, and the X generation, for instance, they weren't really big on saving or buying their own home because they were the baby boomers' first children, and we tended to spoil them, and so they went off and travelled overseas, and we said, go out and have a good time and enjoy yourselves before you tie yourself down. So they didn't tend to save for a home as much. And then my generation, of course, who were the children of the grandparents who came back from the war, we actually always felt an obligation that we needed to do really well with our money and our careers, because we didn't want to let down our families. So, yes. So you know, I'm a baby boomer, as I said, and I've made some silly mistakes through the period of time being married and what have you. So I can tell you some brilliant stories of the things that I've done wrong around managing my money.
Okay,
but
tell us one brilliant story about something you've done wrong.
I'm just hopeful that my ex-husband's not watching the show, because I'm pretty sure he's not. But so when I always think you change in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s and your 50s. So I was married extremely young. I was married when I was 17 and a mum at 18. So I left my husband when I was 32 and took my 15-year, I had two children, so 15-year-old and a 5-year-old with me, and that's when I joined Westpac actually. But at the time we did get back together again. And we were managing hotels in those days before I went into banking, and so we were always, as a relation, you understand this, we were always going to own our own little boutique pub one day. And so he said, why don't we give our marriage another go, and he bought this pub, and he said, why don't you come in as a financial partner, which, of course, you know, again, you think, well, let's give this a go. So yes. I'd resigned and cashed in all my long service leave, my superannuation, sold my house and everything, put all of the money into the hotel, and I knew within 3 months I'd made the wrong decision. Just was miserable. I think it was going back to the ex-husband, so I should have probably come to see you.
Yes, if only you'd known each other.
Yes.
And Tita,
yes.
you must see things like this in relationships, in your counselling.
Yes, I mean, like, again, I'll go back to each couple is different, and because we consider what is the attitude, what is the habit that you're bringing into the relationship, it's that combination. There might be people that come with the attitude of very task-oriented, this is what I would like us to do, we're going to save for the house, etc. But someone else comes with a very different approach. They might just be the one that, well, maybe we'll just enjoy the first years of our marriage and then later on we start saving or something. So we all learn messages about earning money, saving, spending money from our upbringing.
And we also need to learn how to deal with regret, don't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You've heard from the experts. Let's now go to the streets to see what the people have to say.
Where do you draw the line with what is mine is yours and yours is mine? When mums are home raising kids, they aren't earning any income. So what is the fairest way to manage the family's money?
In my case, I went out and got a second and then a third job. So my wife, actually we did the trade-off. I did extra work, she stayed home and raised the kids, and I think long term that was the best investment we ever made.
I guess we just share everything equally and be open about it.
The fairest way to manage money, I think just talk about it openly. Just to be open and honest and make each other aware of, you know, the challenges that can arise when having children. But open and honesty is the main thing.
We sort of had a joint account that we both accessed, and I did most of the budgeting, and my husband was very trusting.
Oh, that's a hard one, really, when kids come along, because they absorb all the money. I suppose it's always been the same with my wife and I. We've had a joint account. I earn it, she spends it, so it goes fairly easily, really.
When children come along, what do you think is the fairest way to manage money in a partnership?
Don't give many. Spend it all first.
And do you think a husband should pay a stay-at-home mum superannuation while she's not working?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's the biggest unpaid job in the world, being a mother. Yeah, that's a very good call. I think that's fair. I'd go for it. Yeah, I would.
That has never been raised as an issue with us. Look, it's a matter of having the money to do it at the end of the day.
I think it sounds fair. You know, we both work full time, and when we have days when we take care of our son full time, and it's a hard job. So you know, and I think a lot of women can actually be, if they've looked after a child for the whole life, you know, they might end up in a situation where they don't actually have any super. So yeah, I think it sounds fair. Yep.
I think so, because it is a partnership when you're raising children, and you never know what the future is going to bring.
Well, that's a hard one. I think in a relationship, you build wealth together. So reality says my super is her super in the long run anyway.
Yes, I did. I do that. We share a super. Yes,
I've got super and I've never worked.
Never had a date, never done one.
Brilliant.
Heaps.
Joining us now is Street Talk reporter Sandra Cavallo. Welcome, Sandra.
Hi, Rob and Christie. Hi.
Great to have you with us. I thought that was fascinating to hear them talk, and especially about the area of women having super when they're off having children. Was that a surprise to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really looking forward to asking the streets that question, and generally most said yes. You know, they're really for it because it's seen as an unpaid job. But one thing that really stood out to me is the fact that, well, what is my super? If I was a man, my super automatically belongs to my partner. And is that the case if the relationship was to break up for whatever reason? I'd be curious to know that.
So it's not automatically the partners. I mean, it depends on how long they've been together, how much superannuation he had accumulated before they married. But all assets, when you think about it in a relationship, are the woman's or the man's assets are there to negotiate who gets what. And I'll give an example of mine, that I had superannuation as well as my ex-husband had superannuation. So it was who gets what in that particular instance. But I loved what they were all saying, and I particularly loved that they thought that when a woman takes time out of work that they should subsidise her superannuation so that she's not missing out in those periods of time of having more in her superannuation.
The comment was made of being the hardest unpaid job in the world.
It is. So how many people are actually doing it? Having super paid while they're being
I mean, I'm obviously representing Westpac, so I can give a big... At Westpac, if you actually take your time out of work for 12 months, maternity leave, as a woman, Westpac pays your superannuation for the full 12 months.
Wow.
And Gail announced that, Gail Kelly, our CEO, announced that about 18 months ago, and we were the first company. But what was great about that is all the others said, what a good idea.
Yep.
We'll do that too.
Brilliant.
So it's about being a leader and saying, and when you do it because, number one, you want to look after your staff, but you also want to set an example of what we can all do as a community to help women, and I think superannuation is one of the biggest issues.
So one more person made a valid comment there. Like when you go down to one wage during that time, it might be difficult enough to budget just living. How would you practically tell people to put ahead that extra 10% of an income that they're not actually getting?
They don't have a spare 10%.
9%.
So it doesn't exactly have to be the compulsory, equal to the compulsory amount. It can be a certain amount. Also, they need to go to an advisor, because when you are the main income earner, there's certain government subsidies that you can get into certain superannuation things. So be aware of what's available to you. So many people don't seek advice. Like, they seek advice around relationships and help around that. But when it comes to finances, there are so many options available to you that you really are just not aware of. And you need to know when you're working for an organisation and when you start, ask those questions. So what do you do for women and families if I come to work for you? So ask what the benefits are.
Great.
And that could be a big indicator of where you want to work.
Yeah. So ask some good questions, ask the experts, and go in informed. Sandra, thanks for popping in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. We'll be back with more of The Exchange in just a moment. Welcome back to The Exchange. We're talking with Westpac's Larke Riemer and couples counsellor Tita Cook about how to manage finances within a relationship.
Absolutely, and it's a great discussion.
It is a good discussion.
Ladies, tell us, what advice would you give to couples moving forward on how to manage their personal finance?
Personally, I would say that you need to get advice. So you need to sit down and have those discussions to start with your partner, or when you're getting married, and then bring in a third person. Now, that could be one of the family, or it could be a financial advisor. I think money is an important part of building a relationship. So don't shy away from the fact that you need to find out more about one another and what accounts or what bills or what obligations that each other has, and agree on the path you're going to take on how do you cover that. So don't go into a relationship, a marriage or anything blind. Make sure that you have those right discussions.
I think as well, I'd add to that is whatever the person is like before you get married, they will be like that after you get married as well. And I think that's an important point just to bring in. Tita, what would you add to that?
I would say also the conversations about money, to treat them as a business approach, as in it's important not to be talking about it when the emotion temperature is starting to escalate. So find the right time, the right moment. Do not use language like you and always and never, like you always a spendthrift and you can never have money or you cannot stick to the budget. Talk about your experience in it, name the feeling, because money is going to cause emotive reactions. So if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling anxious, rather is when I realized there was not money in the account, I felt frustrated or I felt very anxious.
Yes.
What I would prefer is that you let me know when this happens. That's what we would call assertive talking, which is what we teach couples to do. Yeah, and the other very important thing is because we all bring, like we've discussed, our own past experiences, family of origin, beliefs, values, cultural issues that influence our attitudes and our habits on how we're going to manage money. Please talk about money, because unspoken expectations are not a good start to any relationship. And as Larke said, it's very important if we're going to be I and you, the couple, there has to be that culture of we and us and our. And finances is part of that. You can have separate accounts, but you need to know about what's happening with the finances.
I think as well, just rising above regret, you know, things that you've done wrong in the past and embracing the future. Thank you, Larke. Thank you, Tita, for joining us. And absolutely wonderful discussion today. Really appreciate it. Please go to our website for a fact sheet as well as more information about the show, The Exchange. We look forward to seeing you next time.
See you soon.